Hello and welcome to the Story Engine podcast. Today on the show, we have Dr. Jill Carnahan. We are going to learn Jill's story of overcoming breast cancer at a young age, Crohn disease, a very nasty autoimmune condition, and how she's used that to heal herself physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and is now empowering many other clinicians to come into a better alignment with their life and what they're doing and healing people in much deeper ways, which is so needed in this world. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Dr. Jill Carnahan. Dr. Jill Carnahan, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. I am excited to be here.
I am excited to have you on the show. Health and wellness experts are my favorite people because you've made such a big impact on my life. But before we dive into your brilliance today, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, so I have a functional medicine practice in near Boulder, Colorado, where I do complex chronic illness consultations. But the real story is my story, which is I grew up on a farm, one of 5 children, got aggressive breast cancer at the age of 25, and fought that battle and won it. And then several years later, developed Crohn's disease. So I've been the guinea pig with multiple complex chronic life-threatening conditions. And through that, as has always been my way about life, is the curiosity and desire for finding root cause answers in complex and chronic illness started really with my own illness. And so using that, I've really developed a practice seeing the patients have the most complex, chronic, mysterious illnesses, almost like a medical detective.
Amazing. So was it growing up on a farm? Was there something that had to do with growing up on a farm that was at the root of this experience for you?
Yeah, I always say it's a story of a farmer's daughter, the cornfields in Illinois, and a malicious group of angry cells, which ended up being my cancer. The interesting thing about that dichotomy is that you would think the place I grew up was the most idyllic in the world. We had multiple acres. We grew our own fruits and vegetables. My mother was a retired nurse, so we were very health conscious. I often saw a chiropractor or an acupuncturist or someone like that before I would see a medical doctor, although we weren't opposed to medical treatment. There was nothing strange there, but we had a very holistic lifestyle. But unbeknownst to me, on this farm, there was some nasty chemicals, atrazine, organophosphates, pesticides, and others that were likely poisoning me without me knowing from a young age, and possibly even in utero in my mother's womb. So the story is that this beautiful, wonderful, incredible family and home that I grew up in was really slowly killing me. And that turned out to be my story as far as an environmental toxic expert and understanding that the consequences of living in this toxic world have a huge impact on our health.
I have a resonant story of
Yeah.
many different toxins and many different adventures in my own life. And one of the things I'm curious about is how long. So you mentioned aggressive breast cancer at 25 and then Crohn's disease. And then there was some amount of time in integrating and learning and healing yourself and then becoming the leader, the doctor that you are now. Tell me about the time in between these and how you related to yourself and these conditions
Yeah.
before you became the doctor and the leader helping other people.
Yeah, so as many the classical hero's journey, we don't really know what we are or who we came into this world to be until we start to face adversity and suffering. And so part of my story isn't just, oh yeah, I had cancer and overcame it and learned. It's actually, how do we all, every single one of us every day has these difficulties that are seeming insurmountable. And so part of my goal is not just medically, but spiritually, emotionally, physically, and otherwise. How do we actually teach people resilience and how to deal with these things? So for me, it was cancer at 25. And for the reference of your listeners, 25-year-old cancer, it's like 1 in a million. I won the lottery. It's incredibly rare. And when it happens at that young age, it's incredibly aggressive. So I wasn't dealing with your grandmother's breast cancer. I was dealing with a whole different form that was absolutely threatening my life. I ended up getting incredibly aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, like the whole treatment, but also sought out, naturopathic solutions, nutritional, diet, lifestyle, prayer, meditation, community, all the things that I now teach to my patients. But I had to literally experience that and understand it at a level of patient because just the head knowledge, I always say that a battle with breast cancer taught me far more than my medical education. And then 6 months after I completely got through all of the treatment and was considered in remission for breast cancer, I was doing my rotations. I was back in, my clinical rotations for medical school, very sick, very malnourished, completely bald. I had lost all my hair from treatment. I was down about 20 pounds to the same weight I was about 14 years old, so very malnourished. And I started having cyclical fevers, and I started having diarrhea and blood and pain. And suddenly one day when I was in the ER, I passed out and I realized, okay, there's something else going on. This isn't just post chemotherapy. I ended up for emergency surgery, and I woke up to a surgeon telling me that I now had Crohn's disease. Now, you might think that's like, how bizarre. What is the likelihood of a 25, now 26-year-old getting both of these crazy complex diseases? But to me, it makes a perfect story, which is how I look at my patients. It's what's the trajectory that's leading them to illness, and how do I reverse that trajectory? So for me, what it was I had undiagnosed celiac disease. Since the age of 14, I'd been on a gluten, or not a gluten-free diet. I'd been on a vegetarian diet, which was almost killing me because I had lots of processed foods and high gluten, which again, unbeknownst to me, I had silent celiac, and gluten was a very toxic food for me to be eating. So then, in the light of the chemotherapy, which increased permeability of my gut and caused a total toxic load from the inside out, that was the perfect storm, in addition to my genetics for Crohn's disease, to then develop Crohn's disease. And what I realized is all the things inside and out that affect us toxically and increase the permeability of the gut can also lead to something like Crohn's or colitis. And then I spent the next several years completely curing myself of Crohn's disease, which is considered incurable, by the way, through my knowledge of the gut microbiome and the milieu inside our bodies.
So you mentioned spiritual, emotional, as well as physical resilience. Can you tell me about the spiritual process that was occurring for you alongside this? And my experience, and maybe we can dive into this more, is it's much more than a physical relationship when these things are occurring.
Oh, Kyle, you hit the nail on the head. And I really love that you asked that, because one place I want to be in the world now more than ever, people are suffering from lack of meaning, lack of purpose, overwhelm, difficulties in life. And I think that there's no other way than to find meaning and purpose in whatever way that looks like for you. I always say faith is our relationship with the inevitable uncertainty of life. So faith, whether it's a Christian, Judaic, Buddhist, or other background, even atheist background, we all have some way to deal with the inevitable uncertainty. And I feel like that's so important to teach people and give them the tools, because uncertainty is part of life. And unless we can embrace change and uncertainty, we're going to be floundering. So for me, that's the spiritual background. For me personally, in my story, I remember hearing I had breast cancer, knowing it was aggressive, and not knowing if I had 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years. Like it was, who knows? You're in this midst of this brand new diagnosis that's life threatening. And I do remember I had a very strong faith, believing that somewhere, somehow in the midst of difficulty, there's meaning and purpose. So I was searching for that at the time after my diagnosis. And I heard this radio pastor, and he said, the sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God. And for me personally, I took that on to be that there was a place here, the knowledge that I was going to gain through this. Number one, I knew at that moment I wasn't going to die. There was just an intuitive knowing. I was like, I'm going to survive. And I think that part of that complete confidence that I knew that was going to survive is actually what allowed me to survive. And then second, I knew that if I looked and I reframed this problem, instead of being like, oh no, woe is me, why me? I'd never asked that. I said, how can I learn from this? How can this make me a better human and a better doctor? And as soon as I changed the question around the adversity, it shifted everything for me. And I began to dive into the research and look at things. I did a whole different treatment plan than my doctors recommend. I literally created a plan personalized for me, which is what I do for the patients right now. And so that experience, I don't think any sort of medical training could have ever given me that spiritual understanding of how to overcome adversity and how to shift our perspective on giving those things meaning and purpose.
I want to share a little bit of some of my experience in this. I had a lot of gut health issues that occurred in many different ways, probably some toxins growing up, but particularly living in South America. I swam in an Amazonian lake and got infected with some nasty things going on. And I didn't really know how to take care of myself for a couple of years. And this cascaded into Hashimoto's disease.
Yeah.
And I remember hiring my first life coach, and they said to me, what if Hashimoto's disease is your superpower? And I remember laughing at him and feeling
Uh-huh.
absolutely insulted that what a dumb idea, because it would cause so much pain, physical joint pain, jaw pain, fatigue, anxiety. One of the most interesting things, which I think you know this really well in yourself and in your patients, is there's like a certain biological anxiety that these conditions create, and we almost never have the presence of mind to attribute them to I'm feeling biological anxiety. We always assign it to things outside of us or things that we're doing or the stories that we're telling.
Yeah.
And so I remember being very convinced to my coach that this was, in fact, a bad thing happening to me. Um, my career as a copywriter and storyteller and speech marketer was still growing. And about a year later, I found myself in a room filled with all kinds of health and wellness experts just like you, but I didn't really know or understand this community that well. And I remember sitting next to somebody saying, "Hey, my name's Dr. Grace. I help people overcome chronic autoimmune diseases through better gut health." And I started thinking about my own experience. And for in an instant, like everything I was thinking about my copywriting brain and the skills
Yeah.
that I had combined with who I was, and I started to relate to my story differently. I wasn't quite as smart as you, and just from the get go, learning how to be like, I can be excited about this.
Yeah.
But I had this moment that transformed, learning that my story, and not necessarily like the skills that I had or what I had learned or developed or achieved, but the experiences that I had that I thought were weaknesses or challenges or the hardest parts of me actually set me apart in a marketplace, just like they have for you. And I really appreciate the spiritual and emotional elements to this. And I still have more work to do and more learning to do. And I'm sure we all
Mm.
do, but I appreciate the excitement that you've brought to this process for yourself, in your own transformation.
Thank you for sharing, because I think that is so important. And so many of our patients, I mean, really every patient is facing their own mortality and their own illness. And really how we face that, there couldn't be, I mean, they always say, you can have everything in the world, but the one thing, if you lack health, right? It's like one of those things that you cannot, it doesn't matter how much money you have if you don't have health.
Doesn't matter how much money you have, you'll spend it all. It doesn't matter if you have a great family, you're not going to feel like
Yeah.
you're a great part of the family with it.
Mhm.
Whatever other things that exist in your life lose their flavor
So
when you
true.
don't have health.
Yeah. Mm.
Tell me a bit about the clients that you work with these days. What do they look like? What do they have going on? And what are some of their main problems that they're facing?
Yeah, so what I realized in this journey is 2016, which is now 10 years ago, I was so full, I had to stop accepting new patients. Now, I still selectively get patients through referrals, and I have a concierge program that's for a very personalized, way that they have, my cell phone, they can contact me. But I'm now building up other practitioners. So I say I want to teach the teacher, influence the influencer, and
Yeah,
create this learning, because I have a passion for teaching. And I know that I can only see so many patients every day. So my big days might be 10 patients a day, which is a lot for a functional medicine practitioner. And so there's a limit, but there's no limit if I train and teach other doctors and other providers to have the same passion and the same open-mindedness about medical detective work, and also just giving the patient this connection, which is part of the healing process. I
mm-hmm.
know I can really transform. And so I at this point in my life, want to get my mid-levels full. I still see patients, but I'm generally not taking on a lot of new patients myself, because I know that my best work is to amplify and take this message to the world. Because as you know, if you've ever been to an ER in the last couple of years, or you've been to many of the specialists, gastroenterology, neurology, there's long waiting lines, and they are doing their best. but there are so much dissatisfaction because most of them are in this box of a 10 or 7 minute visit. And even in the ERs, I mean, I've had patients come away and they haven't even been touched by a physician. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that's really sad. The way that our system is, it's so business driven and corporate driven that we're losing that connection with humanity. And honestly, as we just kind of talked about, the spiritual medicine is a safe container for that patient to be heard and to be listened to and to have time and space and to be loved. That's really where the healing starts. So I'm a passionate teacher of the teachers out there.
Then let's reframe, especially when I'm talking about the problems that they face. What are your ideal clinicians or
Uh,
healers? What are some of the three problems that they face that you want to help them with in what
Okay,
you're
I love
describing?
that. That feels really good. That was a perfect reframe. And I will say, because it's like, this, it's like the food chain, right? So
Yeah.
our patients, all of us that are dealing with this, are the people who have been neglected by the system and told, I don't know what's going on. Your labs are normal, or I don't know why you feel so poorly. You look fine. Those kinds of patients, which typically is chronic fatigue, autoimmunity. And at the core of functional medicine, what I teach is there is a toxic load and an infectious burden. And somehow they can, even your story of swimming in the rivers or the streams or the lakes where there's probably protozoa and organisms, you might have gotten some exposure, and those infections that lie dormant can create immune dysfunction. Or if you were in, like me growing up on the farm, organophosphates, atrazine, chemicals, glyphosate. So this toxic load plus infectious burden is the groundwork for creating inflammation and immune dysfunction, which manifest as autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, migraine headaches, unusual rashes, mast cell activation. So this is the milieu of the kinds of patients that these physicians are treating. And then on to that physician or that clinician or that practitioner, they're the ones out there that they are curious. I say empathy and curiosity are the foundation of a great employee and a great physician, and someone who really is going to do well in this work, because they have to be curious enough to go learn and study new problems and new ways of seeing things. If they've stopped learning after medical school, they're probably not going to find the answers or enjoy the work that we do, because you have to be curious. Every single patient is a new opportunity to learn and to go deep. And no one's like the patient you just saw previously. So because of that, you really have to be love to learn. You have to be curious. And what I see right now is, because of it's almost like the box closing in on the physicians, whether it's administrative burden of seeing more patients and productivity, and they're being told they need to see 30 patients a day, or it's just the burden of the bureaucracy of the paperwork and the prior authorizations and all of that. What I want to do is give them freedom to go back to that patient relationship as primary, because that's where we get the joy, connecting with the humanity and listening to them and understanding. And then, just like you do, Kyle, it's really just telling them their story. What I do every day is just like what you do. I listen to what they tell me very carefully, ask them questions, and then I just retell their story. And all of a sudden they're like, someone gets it. Someone's telling me my story of what it means to be me in this body and what I'm suffering from. And that power, again, we're so common in that way, because the power of telling them their story in a way that makes sense is a game changer for the patient. So if I can teach clinicians who are curious enough to want to know more, that would be my goal.
So, are these primarily clinicians who are working in the mainstream system and want to change and adapt out, or are these already functional medicine practitioners that want to do better?
I think both. We have a ton of people, and I've taught for almost 20 years on most of the main stages of A4M and IFM and functional medicine training, mold toxic illness training, and Lyme disease and complex chronic infections. But what I am seeing is what you just alluded to, which is there's a lot of clinicians that are like curious enough to know that they don't have all the answers for the patients. And I
Hmm.
would say 95% of people who currently do functional, integrative, or root cause medicine have either come against a problem with conventional answers for themselves or someone they love or a patient. There's almost no other way, because wait, we weren't taught this in medical school. I don't know what else to do. And it's those people who get to that point of not having an answer for a patient or a family member or for themselves when they start to branch out. And I'd say now it's just really the tide has turned, and there's a lot of conventional physicians who are shifting and saying, wait, I'm burned out. How can I do this differently?
And that was another thing. You just barely hinted at it, but I think it's probably the core element of their experience. They're burnt out, which means they're tired, they're not making enough money, they're not doing meaningful work, and probably what starts to show up is they're not able to take care of their own health. Some of their own issues start surfacing as a symptom, which we could bring back to the spiritual and emotional things of they probably signed up through medical school originally or some other form of healing to really feel like they were making an impact. And the process of keeping the business going, or the administrative or the bureaucracy, is really exhausting and draining them, which is showing up as health problems.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's exactly it. I think they're really feeling like, oh my gosh, how long can I keep this up? I'm not enjoying. When you lose that, like I go to work every day. I love what I do. I would do it if I didn't get paid because it's so fun and rewarding to connect with humanity and to meet them in that difficult place and to transform their lives emotionally, spiritually, physically. But when you lose that connection, I mean, most people going into medicine or coaching or any of these allied health professions go in with a real intent to help people. And when they
Mm-hmm.
lose that connection, they're filling out paperwork for the insurance company. That's no fun. I know that from experience.
Yeah. And now, tell me what you do or you offer these coaches. Not necessarily the outcomes that you want to promise them, but like, what is it about your philosophy or approach that's different, that's better, that's unique for this community?
Yes. We alluded to it, but I have not spoken outright.
Hmm.
When someone walks in the door, most of them have been medically traumatized because they've either been, like we said, told that they're not sick or they look fine or something's, or they just don't know what's wrong. So they walk in the door a little timid, like, what is this experience going to be like? Is this going to be the same as everybody else? And from the moment they walk in the door, my staff greets them. They'll often give them a wine glass with water. Simple, but it's a symbol of you're special. You mean something, and we will treat you with that reverence here. And then they come back to my office, and we usually spend 90 minutes or more with me on the first visit. And so I want to teach clinicians to have this love and curiosity, because what I know is creating a container for the optimal transformation of another human is what love is. That's a definition we could give of love. And we may not typically teach physicians to love their patients. In fact, in medical school, we are taught the exact opposite. We are taught be objective, don't share personally. That's BS because we are humans first, clinicians second, and we are no better than that patient in front of us. And when we show our humanity, listen carefully, and show them that reverence and love, which again, I'll just repeat that it's creating the space for optimal transformation for another human being without an agenda. All of a sudden, that piece starts to transform their physical health, because to be heard and to be seen and to be listened to and to be loved is a foundational principle of healing that most clinicians are not taught. They're taught to be objective, to be cold, to be cool, to not share. And I can't tell you the number of times where I've shared just little bits, not about me, as far as it's not, the story's not about me, but just enough bit for them to understand that I've been there. I know what it feels like. And so
Hmm.
that interchange between two humans and not just a clinician and patient is what we need to relearn, and what I love to teach clinicians.
Excellent. And another one that's a very good one, and a more common one in the functional medicine, is kind of being the medical detective and
Mhm.
getting to the root cause.
So that would be just, let's not be afraid of complexity, because nowadays, 20 years ago, we'd have someone come in with a sore throat or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or a woman with hormone imbalance, or a male with low testosterone. We'd do a little intervention, and 3 months later, they're back to normal, right? That
Hmm.
doesn't happen anymore. The patients that I see have very many layered complexity of illnesses and issues, and it takes a approach sometimes 6 months to 2 years to really start to move the needle, or to move it enough to where they feel like they've gained their life back. So teaching clinicians to be curious and to be empathetic, compassionate and curious are the real two words that I think matter. Because if you don't want to learn and want to dive deep and want to solve problems, it's not going to be the right thing for you.
Hmm. Okay. Um, and a third flavor. We've got two excellent flavors. What's a third unique thing you want to highlight?
Um, I love teaching, and so not on a realm of spiritual, emotional, just on purely, the physiological complex processes. I love to take complex processes and make them simple and understandable. I'll give you one small example. We know small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is really common, and commonly a cause of IBS, which is
Hmm.
about 33% of primary care visits. In small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, there's often a dysfunction of this thing called the migrating motor complex, which is your small bowel motility to clear that out between meals. I say, you know what? It's like between periods of an ice hockey game, you have that Zamboni that goes across the ice and clears off the ice and makes it pure again. If your Zamboni in your small bowel isn't working, you're going to get SIBO, because you get backup of this excessive problem in the bowel of excessive bacteria. And so then all of a sudden it's like you light up, we've all seen a Zamboni, and we're like, oh yeah, we have a Zamboni in our small bowel. So things like that, where we just explain a really practical kind of thing where they can have a visual picture of something that's happening physiologically.
Amazing. Okay. So it's not being afraid of complexity and simultaneously being able to make complexity simple, which I think is very difficult. I've worked a lot with health experts, and there's people who very much appreciate the complexity, but being able to translate it into simplicity again is
Yes,
not always the easiest thing to do.
so true.
So I would love to hear about a moment in your life. This is going to be post, this is somewhere beyond your own healing journey, but feeling neglected by the system, having the administrative burden preventing you from making the impact that you wanted. And as somebody who's very passionate and personally affected by this, I can imagine it was very painful. And your own moment of burnout as a clinician, where specifically in time and space have you experienced this?
So I want to say two things, and one is a little off of what your question is, but I think it's so important because
Mm-hmm.
it may be the more universal truth. And that is when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, of course, I had surgery. And I grew up on a farm where you're strong, you take care of yourself, you don't complain, you pull up by the bootstraps. And that ethic served me very well. And same with, again, this translates into medicine because in a very male dominated, masculine type of teaching, it's do more, be more, don't complain. In fact, if we could put a catheter in and do 16-hour surgeries, we would have, because you don't stop to pee or eat or sleep. You don't take care of yourself, right? So this self neglect is actually built into the training system. And because I grew up on a farm where those same principles were actually at play, it was easy to kind of let my mind get into this place of self neglect and put everything out there. And I think that's one of the reasons I developed breast cancer at a very young age. But the moment that I remember most is after the diagnosis of breast cancer. I am like laughing. I'm on a gurney getting ready to be wheeled into surgery. And I'm with my family, my ex husband, and some people who were dear to me. And we're laughing, and I'm making jokes about how, I'll be fine. I'll come out with a little bit, less on the left side or whatever things I was saying, just making jokes about the surgery. And here I am, like comforting and entertaining my family when I'm the one on the gurney getting ready to go back to surgery. And I'll never forget, you can imagine the gurney being wheeled away. They say goodbye, and I go in, and the doors, double doors close, and I'm behind there being wheeled back into surgery alone. And the feeling there was this utter, like, I just made everybody happy and laugh and joyful about what was happening. But inside, I'm crying. And I didn't have a place to express that because I wasn't taught as a child that it's okay to have sadness or have needs or those things. And again, this relates to the clinician because there's this ethic in medicine that you are, forgive me for saying this because I don't believe this, but it's almost a godlike status. You don't have needs, you don't have all of this, right? But what happens in that ethic is you're losing the humanity and you're losing the ability to actually relate to the patient and say that. And it relates to the business model that's burning them out because if they don't say, no, I can no longer practice like this, I have to create a new way. Or, no, I can't see 30 patients a day, I have to create a new way. It's all tied together. And it's all tied together because we are indoctrinated in medicine to be strong and tough and don't complain and don't pee and don't eat and don't sleep. And by God, don't be a human, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's all related. And I remember that poignant moment on the gurney because I put aside my humanity at that moment to take care of everybody else. And then doors close, I'm alone, and I start weeping because only then, when I'm alone, can I actually admit that I'm human, I'm sad, and I'm scared.
Great story. Beautiful story. Thank you. Let's hear a different one now. I want the opposite frequency. I want to hear of you feeling totally in alignment in your best gifts, making an impact in the world, a time where you were really validated for this curiosity, for this transformation, and you were making an impact in your practice and also feeling the spiritual alignment of being able to be human and take care of humans better.
So once again, I'm just going intuitively with what comes to mind, and I think it's actually probably more relevant than it may seem at onset. But I worked with a writing coach on my book. And so in those first really couple years, we'd meet at the coffee shop and we'd talk about my story. And he did some interviews with family members and other people to gather data. He was an investigative journalist. And then I did my story and was writing, right? But I remember in those meetings, he took one look at my hands. And I've always been embarrassed because I have pretty large muscular hands. And even as a surgical resident, they'd ask what glove size, and I'd be the same size as the male surgeon because I have pretty large muscular hands. But my writing partner looked at me. He was a professional rock climber on the side. His dad had been for 40 years and started him at like 17 years old. He looked at my hands and said, "Hey, Jill, do you want to go for a climb?" Now I'm in the Boulder, Colorado area, so the climb is not like some of these climbs are pretty intense, right? I
Mhm.
had never climbed before, but this piece inside me, which is relevant to the story, I just looked at him and said, "Sure, I would love to climb." Zero experience, not even an indoor rock climbing gym. And he said, "Okay, let's pick a date in October when it's nice." So a month later, we had a date in October. We met at the base of the Flatirons. Now, many people may not know what the Flatirons in Boulder are, but there's this huge, like 1,000-foot rock face straight up. There's four of them. And they are known and beloved by rock climbers, like professional rock climbers every day are up on those mountains. I had zero experience. My partner said, "I'll bring you the equipment. Can you get some climbing shoes?" So the day before, I went to REI and bought some climbing shoes. Zero experience. And at the base of that climb, I look up 1,000 feet and like, what did I just get myself into? He gave me a 15-minute lesson and I climbed 1,000 feet, 3.5 hours, that entire face. And the moment at that peak was one of my proudest moments of my life because I had overcome this fear, this natural inborn fear of doing something I've never done before. I had the curiosity to be like, I wonder what it would feel like if I could actually do this today with zero experience. And when we got to the top, we sat on the top because you have to belay down the back. And so all the climbers kind of wait their turn. And as we sat there on the top, my heart's still beating fast. I'm like, what did I just do? Looking behind me. He looked at me, he said, "Jill, do you know in all my 40 years of climbing, I have never taken a beginner, ever. I've never even thought of asking a beginner to come up this climb. This is a moderate advanced climb." And he said, "But I saw something in you in the coffee shop, not only your strong hands, but the way you view the world, the way you're not afraid to try something new, and you're not afraid to fail." And I knew that day, had I failed, I could have fallen either to my death or to very serious injury, even though we had ropes, because you know how it is. But I was so proud of that moment because it's how I do life. It's if we are so risk averse that we're afraid to, even with patients, sometimes I'll say, "We don't know a lot about the evidence here, but I feel like it's safe. Would you like to try something new? Would you like to go climbing with me?" Because I feel like that power in giving them something to look forward. It's flow states, right? And that is part of the healing. And it's part of, if I could get that feeling of overcoming the most incredible challenge to a clinician, they would not be afraid in the day to day of these complex chronic patients.
I love that one. I have thoughts about
Yeah.
this particular story, but for now, I think it's time. Would you like to hear your own story?
Sure. Yes, please.
I can remember lying face up on a gurney, seeing the fluorescent lights passing by over my head and the people I loved all around me, going in for breast cancer surgery. I was smiling. I was making jokes, letting everybody feel a little bit of lightness in this moment. And it was difficult because what was slowly killing me, but what I had learned on the farm and later on in the clinical settings was to be strong always, to be godlike, but maybe not in a way that you really like, to be godlike in ways that you don't have needs. Don't pee, don't eat, don't sleep, don't show any kind of weakness. That's what I learned on the farm. And in some ways, it's what got me to this gurney, losing touch with my humanity and the rhythm of life and my spirituality. And now they moved me through the double doors and they put me in this room. And for the first moment, I was alone. And I began to shed tears, knowing that I was scared. I was sad. And I couldn't share that or be that with anyone. I can remember many more years as a clinician being surrounded by that same attitude, embodying it, not just in the patients that were being left and going into surgery, but from the clinicians, those that were trying to help and trying to heal, those that signed up to be and make an impact in the world, losing touch with their own humanity, burning themselves out under administration, under bureaucracy, under the frustration of wanting to make an impact and being so exhausted.
Mm.
And I knew that something needed to change within me. I didn't just want to participate in a medical system that ignored humanity. I wanted to actually heal that medical trauma that came from so many worlds. I wanted people that came through my doors to be treated with respect and reverence, creating a container for the transformation of a human, not just the addressing of a condition or a symptom, but to allow people to become in touch with themselves. I didn't just want to cover up symptoms with medications in a 7-minute interview. I wanted to become a medical detective and get to the root cause of things and understand the complexity, not just the physiological, not just the body states, but the emotional and the spiritual states that all lead to some of the biggest and most common health challenges that we're all facing today. And most importantly, though I wasn't afraid to dive into the complexity, I wanted a way to make it simple and easy and accessible for those that I helped to understand and grow with. This would take many years and a lot of costly and painful mistakes. And as I began to master this process and system, I found that I was making an impact in many people's lives, but I was also starting to see so many more patients than I was able to deal with or handle on my own. And I started writing and documenting this philosophy, this process, into something that I could share with many other clinicians that I knew that I could have such a greater impact, empowering other healers through this process, helping them get back in touch with their humanity and come into alignment with the healing arts that they signed up for when they first signed up for medical school. And I can remember one day working on documenting this process for clinicians just like you, working with my writing coach and being at a coffee shop, sharing my story. And he invited me to something unexpected. Seeing my strong hands, he said, you look like a climber. Would you like to go climbing? And for some reason, I said yes. I had never done it before. I didn't have any experience. But a few days later, I found myself at the base of the Flatirons in Boulder, Colorado, huge 1,000-foot rock faces. And he started instructing and guiding me up this. And I overcame the fear. I overcame the uncertainty. I trusted the process. And I can remember sitting at the top and hearing him say, in my 40 years of climbing, I've never thought of asking a beginner. And it wasn't just that you had strong looking hands. It was the way you see the world. It was the way you do life. And I realized that sitting up there, this was part of the process too. This was part of overcoming challenges, of approaching life, of approaching problems with a curiosity, with an openness, with an excitement. And now I have captured that process in a way that can help clinicians just like you heal more people, get them back in touch with their humanity, and build a practice that allows you to live the life you want, that allows you the spaciousness and freedom to be in alignment with your physicality, your spirituality, your body. And right now, more than ever, the world needs healers who are truly at their best, who have the space and time to make an impact. And I am so excited to share that process with you today.
Wow, Kyle, you nailed it. So good.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I knew you were talented, but it's something else to experience it.
I'm delighted, and yeah, it's an honor with the brilliant health experts, because you people just like you have made a huge impact in my world.
Wow. It's so beautiful how you wove that together. And I just like, to me, I hear you and what you do, and it's so incredible because you empower someone like me to help the world. And again, you're that engine behind me. But it's so actually similar to what I do, right? It's just like you listen so carefully and you told me my story. And I'm smiling so big because my heart is like, I feel heard, I feel seen. And you just did that for me. And it's the exact same as we go in the world, the echo of me seeing a patient who's suffering. And again, you know how that is because you've been in places like that too. But it's so powerful to tell someone their story. I'm just blown away because it's so parallel to what I at least hope to do, in the clinic.
I'm honored. Well, thank you for seeing me as well through this process. And I'm so glad we got to do it. And you did a great job today, in trusting your well developed intuition and sharing the right moments with us. So it's been absolutely beautiful taking you through this process. So, Dr. Jill, do you have any closing thoughts for us today? And where can we go to learn more about you?
Oh, thank you, Kyle. Um, well, I just love one thing that you just spoke to that I think is worth mentioning to leave people with is we have the left brain, that analytical sense. I grew up with a very well developed bioengineering analytical mind. It served me well. But as I've shifted to this intuitive right brain, which is more the feeling of someone's story and then asking questions, and even those two examples, to me, the first part of my left brain said, nope, that's not the right thing. And my heart said, no, go ahead. There's some way that this will connect. And I just want to encourage those out there, even as clinicians, the more we get in touch with that intuitive side and we blend this right and left brain, it's so integral to healing, and it's so integral to telling stories, and it's so integral to finding solutions because that left brain is limited. And so really trusting that way in the world, because that pattern recognition comes from experience and the knowing comes from intuition, and they are powerful parts of this analytical piece that we typically default to.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And where can we go to learn more about you, grab your book, or where can a clinician who wants to go down this process with you start to discover
Yes,
that?
thank you. So, jillcarnahan.com is my main website, hub of everything. I also have a very popular YouTube channel, and you can just find that under my name. The book, the movie, all of that are on my website, jillcarnahan.com. And if you're a provider, right in the top says for practitioners, just click that link for free resources if you are a practitioner and want to get connected with me there.
Amazing. Dr. Jill Carnahan, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you, Kyle.